Good evening, all. Thank you so much for joining us for this fantastic conversation. I am your moderator, Monica McNutt, and as you know, you have tuned in for Game Changers, a post-election conversation on elevating Black women in sports, presented by the Black Women in Sports Foundation and Just Women Sports. We're super excited to have partnered with both of those incredible organizations. I'm glad you're here. I hope you've got your listening ears on and that you're ready to engage. Now, if you're following along on YouTube, there is a chat bar. Please feel free to jump in with questions. We definitely want this to be a conversation. Hopefully we can all learn from one another. Now, with that said, I'm gonna stop running my mouth and introduce our three fantastic panelists. Up first, representing the world of women's soccer, we have Lynn Williams, who played her college soccer at Pepperdine University before going on to the NWSL and also the U.S. women's national team. Currently, she scored the second most regular season goals in the NWSL and is also a board member of the Black Women's Player Collective in that league as well. Welcome, Lynn Williams.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
Lynn, I'm so pumped for you to be here. I can't wait for you to engage and share your perspective. Alongside of Lynn, we're going to go into the Olympic world of fencing, and we are joined by Ysaora Thibus, who is a 14-time gold medalist representing France and a 7-time medalist in world championship competition. She's also been to 2 Olympics. She also is the founder of Essentiel, which is a platform to have conversations with women doing incredible things. Ysaora, welcome to the panel.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so glad to be here.
I can't wait to engage with you as well. Let me just tell you guys, I've had a little sneak peek at these stories. They're going to be fantastic. And so rounding out the panel, representing the world of women's basketball, we're joined by the one and only Sydney Colson, who won a national championship with Texas A&M in 2011 and is currently playing with the Chicago Sky of the WNBA and is a member of the WNBA's Social Justice Council. And I will add, she is a hilarious follow on social media. Sydney, welcome to the conversation.
Hey, Mon. Thank you so much for having me. So glad to be here. Excited.
We're so excited to have all three of you guys. Now, before we jump into stuff that can be a little bit heavy sometimes, we do want to know, just off the top, what is on you guys' playlist? What's the song that gets your hair right, gets your energy going, and helps you tackle your day? And Lynn, we'll start with you.
You're muted.
I got I don't have like a specific song, but I love listening to like Stormzy, Russ, Drake is always in there.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, Code of the Friend, if you know who that is.
Taking notes. I don't.
Beyonce is always one, like Chance. I don't know. It changes on the reg.
Listen, we are entitled to change. That's fantastic. Ysaora, what do you have?
So I prepared some like French Black women artists that I love.
Okay.
So one is like Luz and the Yakuza. She's young. She's awesome. You should check it out. And Isolt. There are like 2 really good Black French singers right now. And one, like I love Coffee because she's Caribbean. So I listen to it a lot. And like one artist from my island. So it's Channel Hill, and we dance in Zouk, so it's not like to practice, it's like more like love songs and stuff, but she's good.
Fantastic. Listen, you guys are helping me add to my playlist. All right, Sydney, don't say something I already know. You got to keep the same energy.
It's Anita Baker for me, or Whitney Houston, or Luther Vandross. Like that's how I start off my day if it's not like a gospel song, usually something by Kirk Franklin.
All right. I love those. Those are classic. You can't go wrong with any of those.
Yeah.
All right, ladies. Before we start this conversation, I think it's important to point out and to applaud all three of you and to encourage our viewers. There's a quote by Elaine Welteroth that I love, and I'm just going to simplify it. But essentially it is, your authenticity is your activism. And so off the bat, I want to applaud each one of you for the spaces in which you occupy, in which you've been your whole and total self. You've shown up for not just yourselves, but for others and so many of the young women watching. Now, having said that, we got to jump into all things 2020, y'all. Lynn, and I'll start the conversation with you. Tell me about, or share with our audience, about why you were compelled to action in terms of the space of social injustices in 2020 or before from the perspective of a soccer player.
Yeah, that's a good question. I've never been somebody who's been very outspoken. I've always tried to be, I don't know, when it comes to social media, a little bit vanilla, just because for a while I was like, oh, I don't want anybody to say anything bad about me, blah, blah, blah. And then I guess as I've gotten older, anytime I see something that's just not right, I can't not say something. And I just felt like this conversation has been so long overdue, and to see Black men and Black women being murdered in broad daylight was just so disgusting and like horrible that like in me, I was just like, this is so wrong. And I have 4 nephews and a little niece, and I'm like, I can't believe that they are having to grow up in this world where this is happening. And so I fear for them. And so I think that now it's the time for me to be like, it's you can't be vanilla anymore. You can't just please people. If people don't like what I'm saying about this, then I don't really want them following me anyways. So yeah, I think that's what started to compel me, is that I was like, this is disgusting, and I can't believe that my nieces and nephews have to see this.
Yeah, that's this summer was certainly lots of powerful moments that will call one to action. Ysaora, I'll ask you the same question. You represent the country of France in your competition. You are from Guadeloupe. The racial issues in those places are not like what they are in America, but those places are not perfect either. So what has compelled you to action?
Yes, I think after my second Olympic Games in 2016, I started to train in America, and I was talking a lot about like racial issues. So it's been a long time too. Like I am Caribbean, so it's different in France and the US, the history of colonialism. And so my island were the place that slavery happened. So it was not like in France. And we have also a history of immigration and stuff. So it's really different. But it's been like years that I really question myself as like a brown woman in the world. And I was in LA when George Floyd's murder happened. And it was really a time that I was like, what can I do? We don't expect in France from athletes to speak up. So it was really difficult. And I had friends being like, oh, America, it's crazy. Racism is crazy. And I was like, but we have social injustices too in France. And we have like racial problem too. So we need to talk about it. And I was like, yeah, I'm ready to really speak up and use my platform. Like Lynn, I think it was not something I was really doing on my social media before. And yeah, I'm more at the end of my career too. So I'm more mature and I'm more ready to talk about it and to try to make a change.
That's terrific for sure. Now, Sydney, for you, both Lynn and Ysaora mentioned that it wasn't something that they necessarily were always doing in terms of being outspoken. You are in a league that this year was really at the forefront of causing athletes on a main stage to be compelled to action. So for you, did you even have a personal choice to make in this, or was it just a league-wide thing and then you were completely on board?
No, I think we all had, a personal choice, because that we had the ability to opt out if you didn't want to play this season because of COVID, which I got along with about 10 or so other players probably around the league, and then you can opt out if you felt like because of George Floyd's murder, Breonna Taylor's murder, if it was too much for you to handle, from a mental aspect, or you wanted to stay home and pursue, social justice on your own, then you could opt out. So for me, I knew that I had a choice, but it became clear to me that once we decided we would dedicate our season to Say Her Name and fighting for Black women specifically, but also talking about Black men, trans lives, but Black women specifically, because we're murdered by state violence and we are often not talked about. So that fact made it clear to me that if I was going to play, it needed to be for something that was going to make a difference and highlight something important.
And you guys definitely had the conversation going. Lynn, I want to come back to you. As I introduced you guys, I mentioned each of the sports spaces that you represent. And this year, there were so many conversations about Black girls in sports. And soccer is one of those frontiers, I'll call it, that not many Black women are in. So for you, as you've moved about this space, how have you been supported by leadership or by teammates? Uh-oh, did we lose Lynn?
Oh, yeah, I think so.
Okay, so of course, y'all know it's 2020. So I'm going to spin that question forward until we can get Lynn back. And Ysaora, I want to ask you similar. Well, first of all, not many people know about fencing and Olympic competition, but it is an individual sport, but you train with other people. That's correct?
Yes.
So in the makeup of your sport, is it a sport that people of color play at a high level?
It's actually like the two countries that really have like people of color are the US and France historically. And so when I grew up in my island, I already had like a role model, like Laura Flessel is like Olympic champion. I was like, wow, it's possible. She's a Black woman. Everything is possible. And then when I started to travel, I was like, okay, no one looks like me in other countries. You know, so it's not a diverse sport internationally. It's a really, really wide sport. So it was really difficult after that to figure it out.
So how did you weigh the potential risks of being ostracized in a sport that is not diverse and using your voice for these causes?
Yeah, I mean, as Sydney said, you have like a choice to make, but it was not that hard. I think also what was the difference this time before all the conversation I had about this topic is like the first time white people were actually looking at us, talking about it. So I felt like they needed also to understand what we had to say. And they were all like, maybe, I mean, some of them were interested to understand what they can do to make a change too, and like to understand their privileges. So I think that my sport too, it was a time that it never happened before. We never talk about inequalities in our sport. It's like we don't have a lot of people. It's really small sport, and the best people are white. So except in France and in America. So I think it was really a time to also talk to them. They didn't respond really. Not everyone responded well. Some people checked on me and they tried to understand. Some others were really not interested. So I think like it's still complicated, and I think this is why we still need to talk about it and try to fight for acknowledging these issues.
It's a simple issue in terms of our fight for equality and humanity, but it is so complicated in which the ways that the division is across platforms, across sports in our lives. And welcome back, Lynn. 2020, it happens to all of us. You're muted.
Yeah, I'm so sorry about that.
All good, but I do want to come back to you on that question. And soccer is not a sport that is popular. I shouldn't say popular, but it's just not a sport that has a high percentage of women of color playing. It is an area in which you have been able to excel. But I'm curious, as you began to use your voice to speak up for those that didn't have a voice, how was that met with teammates and leadership in the NWSL or even in the Olympic team?
Yeah, I definitely think that this year was interesting. Just I felt lucky on my team to have 6 Black girls on the team. And that's a lot. You know, I think that for the first time, all of us looked around and we were like, wow, there's so many women of color on this team, which isn't the case. So I felt like when it was time to do actions or talk about social injustice, I had support. But that wasn't the case on every team. You know, I envy the WNBA just in the sense that your sport, Sydney, was like, I think it's 85 or something % Black and the other percentage is white, whereas our sport is almost the exact opposite. And so I think on some teams you had people who like didn't believe it was existing or why it was existing, or feeling like, yes, there is a problem, but like, how can I help? Or I don't want to, that's an uncomfortable topic. And so it was hard. I think that, like I said, from my team, I was really lucky to have a team that was so embracing and like on board, but that's not the case for everybody. And I felt so sad that was happening. You know, as I've gotten older and, you know, the US team has more Black people on it now than it ever did. But growing up, there was 2 Black people that on playing soccer that I got to look up to. And one was Sydney LaRue, who is close in my age. So she really wasn't somebody I looked up to when I was little. And the other one was Brianna Scurry, who was like a goalie. And I was like, there's nobody that really looks like me playing. So it's definitely been a journey. We're getting there.
Excuse my animal, y'all. I apologize. Sydney, I want to come to you. And Lynn made the great point about the makeup of the WNBA and the unique position that put you guys in. But I want people to understand that it wasn't as simple as our league is mostly Black. There was a lot of conversation, a lot of diligence. You are on the Social Justice Council. Share a little bit about how this season came to be and the Say Her Name campaign was at the forefront.
Yeah, so like I think for us it was like extremely vital that we did something that was going to be felt and heard by people, because we already had like our TV schedule for teams, and we knew like when games would be on ESPN, when games would be on, I think, CBS. So we knew that there were going to be some nationally televised games, and that the opening weekend for the WNBA was going to be really big. Like, obviously people were getting these hoodies, like people were excited about watching, which, you know, is rare, but this was a time where COVID had people at home, and so they were going to be watching TV. So I wasn't, I was out of commission while I was sick, like during the creation of the council. But once they asked me to be a part, like it was basically like we knew we wanted to have Black Lives Matter, Say Her Name on the court, have it on our jerseys. But we were missing some steps. I was on a talk earlier with Leja, and we were talking about how we wanted to highlight Say Her Name, and we were planning on doing all these things to get people to see that hashtag, but we didn't actually make sure that we got in touch with the people who started it. And as you know, that was Professor Kimberly Crenshaw, who started the African American Policy Forum, and her and I got connected, and I brought the fact that, you know, we now have the woman who was in charge. Like, there's no way that we can't have her be either partner with this league through her organization or have her be an advisor for our council. So once that happened and we had some other influential advisors, like, I think we did a good job of making sure that we were educating people throughout the season and amplifying our voices, their voices, and having some calls to action, like getting people registered to vote and take the census, and you know, donate to these grassroots organizations in our collective city. So yeah, there was a lot that went into it, but I think, you know, we tried as best as we could to make sure that we were doing something impactful. You're muted, Mon.
You're right. Sorry, my dog. You guys certainly were impactful in being able to do that. Now, I want to ask each of you about the choice that you made. You've given me incredible, heartfelt reasons on why you've made those choices. But I think part of the conversation was this summer understanding the risk, the inherent risk, right? With sometimes using your voice and using your platform. Why did you choose how you go about spreading the message? And sis, since you're still up, we can stay with you. The question originally was, why do you choose activism, boycotts, or in the case of WNBA, a strike, which I'd love you to explain. Like, why do you choose the actions that you take to move the causes of eliminating social injustice forward?
Well, yeah, so when Jacob Blake was murdered, we had already started our season, and the 3 teams or the 6 teams that had showed up to the gym that day decided not to play. And you probably saw the pictures. They had Jacob Blake's name on their shirts, and they had the bullet holes in their back. And they all kneeled across the floor and everyone was, holding hands in unity. But we decided we weren't going to strike and not play at that point, even though something tragic had happened, during our season, because we started the season and the whole point was for us to be the league on TV that was going to highlight Black women and the fact that our voices are so often not heard, our stories aren't told, and we're forgotten after we're murdered. So it was an important time for us just to reflect, even though it was painful. It was just as hard to hear about as it was to see George Floyd murdered. But after, those days of, talking and grieving about it, and dealing with it the way people needed to, we realized, we still wanted to keep playing because we had come here with a goal and a vision in mind.
Such a well thought out decision. Lynn, I want to spin that to you as well. Both viewerships of women's leagues were up over the summer, and I don't know if we're blaming COVID or people are finally beginning to appreciate women as athletes. We know the WNBA was up, the NWSL was up as well, but with that comes more scrutiny. So as you are choosing to use your platform, what are your decisions?
Yeah. Well, same with us. We knew we were going to be the first league back. And so we wanted, and we knew like the viewership was going to be higher just because we were the first league back. We were like, there must be people who are bored, need to watch sports again. And so we wanted to make a statement. And, historically, we have had a huge rivalry with the Portland Thorns. And we decided to call them and say, hey, we need to do something that shows that we're unified. And so we decided to all kneel. So I thought it was a very powerful picture of every single person kneeling, white, Black, Hispanic, whatever you were, in support of this movement. And, I think we got a lot of scrutiny for it. And through the whole entire Challenge Cup, we continued to do that. But my team, we talked about like how can we push this forward? I think that we did that to protest, to bring a point across and to realize like this enough is enough. But how can we do actual change and actual good and systemic change? So there was definitely talks about doing like sponsoring families and just giving back to people, and specifically women of color who don't get an opportunity to play soccer. And I think that, for some reason in this country, soccer has become like a rich white sport. And in all the other nations, it's just a poor people sport. It's like you get a ball and you can kick it against anything, and it brings people together and community together. And for some reason in this nation, if you're not able to pay for travel ball and your parents can't afford it, and you're not making it to a soccer team, and unless you're somebody who just like wiggles through the cracks. So we feel that, systemic racism is a huge issue, but how can we change it in our community, and how can we speak about it and change the language of how we talk about Black players, how we support our Black players? And I think that was our reasoning of doing our protest, as well as showing that like these murders in the streets are terrible and they're enough. But I think that we have to change the way we speak in our own communities, and that's where we decided to start. So yeah.
That is, man. I think, and I'm so glad we have the three of you guys, because the perspectives are important, right? Sydney is abundantly supported by the looks of it when you look at who makes up her league. And Lynn, that's not the case for you. And then Ysaora, not only is there a national disconnect in terms of you representing France in a smaller island, but fencing is a single competition sport. So as you have decided to use your platform, it seems that it would be of even greater risk for you because you are operating as a solo entity.
Yes, like it's really inspiring to listen to that. I think it was also why I decided to speak up. What you need to understand is, first, it's an Olympic sport, fencing. So in my sport, like we cannot really protest with the rule 50. We would be punished if like we talk about this kind of issues. And like my boyfriend, Racing Boden, who is white, he protested in Lima in Health at the Pan Am Games last year and was in probation after that. So for me, there are two parts. Like I practice in America for 4 years now, and I saw that an athlete could speak up and use his voice and help, like through sport we can do actual change, and it's been really really inspiring for me. I have to say, like it changed a lot of things for me. And I am French, and in France no one talked about it. And we had also a case like George Floyd, called it's a boy from 24 years old who died in a police custody, Adama Traoré, in 2016. And they tried to talk about police brutality for years, and it was not really an important movement. And after George Floyd, we had this huge movement in Paris, and it was beautiful too, because it was an opportunity to talk about these issues in France too. But any other French fencers talk about that, and no other, like really few athletes in France started to talk about it. So I'm really at a different stage than you, because it's so difficult just to open the dialogue and talk about this. It's just talking about that, it was just like big for France. I was like, yeah, an athlete talk about like racial issues. This is where we are at. And France is supposed to be country of equalities, but because of this concept of like color blinded, we cannot say that there is an issue because of the color, so we are at this point that if you are an issue, it's maybe you rich or you poor, like this kind of thing, but not because you're Black, and not because you're children of immigrants, first generation or second generation, or you from the suburb or like the Caribbeans and you have history and systemic racism. We don't talk about that. So for me, that was the challenge, like to really open the dialogue and understand too, because we don't talk about history in France, the history of colonialism. So I grew up in an island where I was taught history of my island from the perspective of the winner of France. So I had to kind of like also re-educate myself, about my own history and my own island. Like we had statues of a white man thinking that he was the person who abolished slavery, while it was absolutely not. It was forced slavery. And for years in books, we had his name saying that he saved like our island and stuff. So it's a lot of steps, a personal step, and also sharing this journey of understanding also what is happening in our country and what I can do as an athlete. I'm learning a lot from what you're doing, guys. Talking a lot with my boyfriend about that, how he's an activist too. And so that's it. That's really good.
That is tremendous, Ysaora. And we, I commend all three of you ladies, but particularly in a space where it still seems that it's not welcomed, which actually brings me to my next question for Sydney and Lynn. This year, the kneeling, there were still people who could not get on board, I'm sure, but the kneeling and the shirts, the US seems to have more of a listening ear on these issues than we've ever seen. But the point of protests or strikes are to disrupt. And so now that it seems that those demonstrations became acceptable, what's the next step? What do you guys feel that needs to be done by your leagues, by your teams, by you personally, to continue making sure that people do not become numb to these issues again? And Lynn, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I think that's a really great question. I think that I was just talking about this with somebody today, honestly, and saying, well, when do we stand? Like, when is the point that we're going to stand? And when are we like in phase 2 of this protest, for lack of better words or terms? And, I don't know. I don't really know the answer to that. I feel like if people can't get on board or don't understand why still, then like, I don't think that phase 1 is over then. Like, I don't really know. you know, we hear the military all the time, and it's like, it's not about the military at all. And I just don't know how to continue to, like, I feel like I'm beating a dead horse sometimes, and I'm like, you're choosing to be ignorant on the matter. But I feel like the way we can change, at least in my sport and the NWSL, is just finally shedding a light and giving Black women the recognition and the voice that they deserve. Like I said, the way we talk about Black women, I think that for too long, Black women have been in this category of, oh, she's just athletic. Oh, she can run fast. She can jump high. She like, and all it has to do is her physical attributes. Whereas when we talk about white women, it's like, oh, she's fast, but she's also has a smart soccer IQ. She has a great technical ability. And so there's almost like more room for success and growth. And so I'm like, why is that conversation different just because we're based on our skin tone? And I think that we need to have diversity training, like, across the board. I don't know why that's not happening. And I think that we need to get Black women in higher places of power, so we have a voice, or somebody who has a Black experience, and not just white women and rich white men, because they don't know the experience that I have growing up. But I think that's where it starts, is just changing the conversation of how we talk about people of color.
Well said, for sure. Sydney, I'll ask you the same question. You guys were praised, well, by all of the media outlets that I follow. But again, there was a sect out there that didn't appreciate the intersection of politics and sports. Although this isn't political, it's a humanity issue. What is phase two? When do you stand? I love the way that Lynn phrased that question.
Well, I think, the point you made is really important, because like when Kaepernick was doing it, when he was kneeling 4 years ago, when players in the WNBA were kneeling or wore shirts, and there were consequences for those actions, a lot of people weren't doing it. And now it has almost become like, what I compare it to is like the businesses and the companies and the individual people who may have put up like a black box, but you look at the rest of their page or their story, and there was never any mention of anything. You can tell that the people that they employ are not Black. All you said was like Blackout Tuesday. And it was just very performative. And so now kneeling, there's no risk. There's no risk really to being in solidarity with Black people in this moment. In fact, this would be the time where you would be ostracized if you weren't doing it, because it's like the cool thing or the right thing almost to be doing, even though these are the same problems that Black people have been facing in this country since its inception. Like, we literally are not asking for anything new. It's just the fact that white people saw a person murdered in their, for 8 minutes, you watch someone be killed. But for a lot of Black people in poor communities and people in communities, people of color, like, you've seen people be shot before. You've seen someone be killed, and it's sometimes not by a person of their race. So this isn't anything new for us. And so for me, until we get to a point where others are having to be uncomfortable with what we're doing, which would be when we stop the protest that's okay and that is palatable, but when we do something or they do something in their own personal lives, not just with the Black people on their team or because social media is, all worked up about an issue. But when you have an uncomfortable conversation with your family, with your friends, when you're willing to risk relationships and your privilege, well, then that's when there will start to be some change, because Black people and people of color have been fighting for this thing for a long time, and you haven't listened. So we need the people who are in these positions of power, who are continuing this systemic racism and benefiting from it, to be the ones who employ change.
That is so well said, and it is a perfect segue to our next segment of questions. And we talk about allies. That was another word that became very popular over the summer. Allies, champions, disruptors. essentially they are all synonymous for people that don't necessarily identify as Black people, largely white folks, who truly and sincerely want to stand alongside Black people in this fight. And Ysaora, you actually mentioned your boyfriend, who is white, who by my definition, protesting at an Olympic event where he is absorbing tons of risk, would be someone that I would see as an ally. But for you, as you've navigated it, how do you define allies, champions, people who are willing to stand in the fight?
That's I think it's a really difficult question. I think there is not a perfect way to be an ally because they're making mistakes. That's the point. They made mistakes about like understanding, and they're learning through the journey. And I think this is what is important, is to accept the tough conversation, to accept the struggle, to accept that you don't understand, and to be there. So I cried a lot, and I yelled a lot at him, for example, and to make him understand that he doesn't understand, and he just needs to stand by and listen to me a lot, this kind of thing. So I don't think that there is a perfect definition. I think it's about trying to figure it out and question yourself and accept that you made mistake and you want to do better, because this is what it's about. It's like, it's years and years of pain, and we can't magically fix it. It's going to be a lot of work. And we need to accept that amount of work. It's not something like, oh, okay, I'm an ally, I'm standing by your side, it's good, I'm not racist. Like, no, it's really like, what can I do? And it's an everyday thing. We're still talking about it a lot. Like, he knelt in Lima, and then he was punished by the USOC. And now he was struggling because he was like, okay, the USOC after the George Floyd's murder wants to do something, but they're kind of hypocritical about that before. And so, do I work with them or not? Can I do something? And he contacted them, like in fencing, all the Black community, talk about that. Like, what can we do? Can I I don't know, spread the messages for you? Like, can I do something, or can I just support you? Like, what can I do? And even these conversations were really difficult. Like, oh, we don't want your help, and like, that's not your place to do that. So he had to understand a lot of things. I was like, and it's normal that, I mean, everyone is emotional. We had to go through this also emotional phase to also now be a little bit more serene about that, and like, maybe we step back a little bit and like do like, what can we actually do right now all together? There are a lot of phases in that. I think it's difficult. So I don't have the answer, but I think it's like Sydney said, like, through a lot of conversations. And now he's working with the USOC, and one of the priorities, like, to give the opportunity to the athletes to talk, like to the Olympic athletes. We don't have this opportunity. We're scared to talk. If we go to an Olympic event, we cannot protest. That's not, I mean, that should not be happening in 2020. So we're working on that. Like, in these huge organizations, it's also their position to be like, okay, we need to listen and to figure out things to make a change too.
I love, Ysaora, that you said, you acknowledged how difficult these conversations are, even in your personal romantic relationship. And it actually brings me to a point that I think we have a perfect intersection to have Sydney and Lynn on. And I want to say this from the most healthiest, kindest place possible. But in the midst of the WNBA bubble, Sydney, you guys were at the forefront with these T-shirts with the Say Her Name campaign. And Sue Bird, who, congratulations to Sue and Megan, recently got engaged. Among some thought leaders, there was this idea, and Lynn, you certainly can chime in as well, that the star power of Megan and Sue at points was an easy out for media to acknowledge Sue or acknowledge Megan versus some of the issues that some of the WNBA players, or the league, in fact, was trying to put forward. And I'm sure that both Megan and Sue would firmly stand in their allyship. In fact, Sue helped get the Warnock T-shirts going. But there is this dance between pushing Black women and Black men to the forefront and also speaking on behalf of. I mean, Sydney, can you speak to the sentiment in the bubble as that was happening over the summer?
Yeah, I mean, I think not even if we're not speaking specifically about them, but like you said, yes, they have both made it clear, you know, like they're committed to being allies and to, like Issa said, to try to make sure I am acknowledging a problem and educating myself. And when you speak out, when people speak out and there can be risk associated with them speaking out, then I tend to believe, you know, it must be something that you believe in. If you can lose money or you can lose support or something along those lines, if you have something to lose as a white person and you still do it, you're on the right path usually. But yes, your point is valid. In a lot of arenas, when there's an uncomfortable conversation going on and it affects Black people, sometimes they will try to put white people in positions to, you know, speak up, when really, in my opinion, yes, you can ask white people their opinions, but this is mainly a time for Black women and Black men to be speaking about their experiences and the pain that we have experienced, that our families and ancestors have experienced, because that's what we've been tackling for decades and centuries. And so I think it's like, you know, the easy thing to do sometimes, because it can be tough, I'm sure, for white people to have to hear from Black people over and over about the things that you're doing that are microaggressions or straight out racism, or, you know, like just, you know, covert discrimination that white people don't pick up on until it's brought to their attention. And even then will still, you know, ask you, well, is it that though? Was that really racist? And as a Black person, you know what it feels like, even if it looks like something to somebody else, like, you know what the root was. So yeah, I think that's a valid point. Like, I think a lot of times they want for the allies to be the face sometimes, or be pushed to the forefront, and it's a conversation, in my opinion, that needs to be heard from the mouths of Black people, so that people do have to deal with the uncomfortable aspect of it, because until you're uncomfortable enough, you're not really going to change.
For sure. Lynn, I just want you to chime in, because to your point, if your league is entirely on board, it becomes largely a league of allies. How do you manage the support of your voice versus the almost encroaching on the spotlight? We're literally all trying to figure this out together. Is it me? We have a couple more connectivity issues. Okay, we're gonna get back with Lynn.
I don't necessarily love the word ally, because like Sydney said, like, you could easily post a Black square and then claim that you're an ally. What's happening?
We got you, Lynn. Yes.
Yes, you can hear me? Okay. Sorry, I don't know what's happening. I was saying, I think that one second. I'm just gonna keep talking. If you can't hear me, then just, I don't know. Allies, I don't really love that word, just because I think, like Sydney said, you can post a Black square and it's easy to be like, oh, I'm an ally. When like Sydney said, you haven't done anything for the Black community. You haven't tried to get to know Black history. You haven't educated yourself, but it was easy to just post a Black square. I do think that it's hard. Like, sometimes, like you said, it's easy to just be like, oh, it's coming from a white voice or a non-Black voice. It sounds better, but I feel like the only way change happens is if we have uncomfortable conversations and uncomfortable and put ourselves in uncomfortable situations. I don't know why talking about Black people is uncomfortable. It makes no sense to me, but it just is for some people. I think you have two types of people. One where they either feel guilty and just don't want to talk about it, or you have the other people who just don't believe it exists. And so I just think that, yes, it's amazing that you want to have people who are, I don't even know what a word I would call it, but allies. But it's not, it's time to support, not be the voice for Black people. And so, we have been living our lives like this forever and been fighting for this forever. We know exactly what's wrong. We know exactly what needs to be done. We know exactly how we got to this point. So it's your turn to just listen and just echo what is already being said. It's not like, for some reason right now, I think people think this is like a fad or like something to be idolized. It's not. It's just, we want change. So how can you just echo that voice instead of putting your voice first and then saying, oh, I supported you? And you're like, well, no, you kind of just took over and now we're back in the same situation as we were before.
Yeah. Man. Woo, yes. Well said, Lynn. Through all the technical difficulties, we received that. I will ask you guys, because I know, even for me personally, and I'm sure as many of us on this call, you get phone calls after George Floyd is murdered. You get phone calls after Jacob Blake is shot in the back 7 times. And it is people who you had great relationships with, and they start the conversation, I didn't see myself as a racist, but now I understand that I need to be more than not racist in this conversation. And to you guys' point about allies, I literally said to one of my friends, when you're in a room, just take inventory of who's in the room. How often are you the only white person? How often are you the only white woman? And so later this year, we were actually in a meeting, and she texted me afterward and was like, Mon, I noticed something that I've never noticed, that you were the only Black person and Black woman in the room. And I'm so proud to be your friend. And I think for me, it's those little things, right? Like, she didn't necessarily go out and protest, but becoming more mindful and adding more women of color to her roster when she has an opportunity that she can't meet, but maybe a woman of color could, is a part of the little steps that make a difference. So I really want to go to Lynn, but you're having all these technical issues because your teammates are mostly white. So what have those conversations been like within your locker room?
Yeah, first of all, I want to say I can hear you the whole time. So that's like so weird that like you can't hear me.
We got you. You're good now.
Okay. Yeah, I talk about this with my sister all the time. I do think that is a good start. My roommate, Sam Ewis, is white, and she was from Boston, and she just hasn't experienced Black culture a lot. And so we've had so many conversations from, is it okay for me to say this? Can I call you Black, or do I have to say African American? And I'm like, no, you can call me Black. To just like things about my hair too. And so I think like her exposing herself to Black culture is, I think, a good step. And like you said, I just don't think people notice. And I do think that's where it starts. I think outright racist people is a whole nother thing to tackle. But for somebody who wants to help and is willing to help, I find it interesting that sometimes some people will be upset in the way that they're going about trying to help. And I'm like, can we support them and teach them instead of just getting mad? I'm like, they're trying, so let's uplift the people who are trying. But it's difficult. It's interesting. Like, you have some people, like I said, who are willing to listen and learn. And then you have other people who are so like, oh, this isn't happening. And so in my sport, it's been crazy. We, like you said at the very beginning, we started this Black Women's Player Collective. And the way it started was we were in the Challenge Cup, and our NWSLPA put out a statement saying all players are feeling supported right now. And us Black players were like, no, that's not how we feel at all. And so Midge Purse actually was the one who was like, you know what, we need to have a voice for ourselves. We need to start something. And the men's team started their own player collective honestly, I don't really know what their name is. That's really bad of me. But we at first were going to partner with them, and then we were like, no. Women face a whole nother set of issues that men don't have to face. And so, that's something that we started, and like, that's how we have decided to have a collective voice. And I think it's much easier when you're doing it as a collective than just one single person. But we do in our group have a ally section of people who I'm like, if you're really willing to learn, listen, and not just say, oh, I'm part of the group just because you have to do work. Like, you have to go out there and fundraise. You need to start helping us doing systemic change and like helping the Black community. And so that's something that I'm really proud of us for doing. And it's long overdue. Like I said, like, these conversations are long overdue, but that's how we've been starting to change.
So dynamic, and again, perfect segue, Lynn. I swear this conversation is flowing. I hope you guys are enjoying it as much as I'm doing, because Lynn, you mentioned the Black Women's Player Collective in the NWSL. Ysaora, you have this platform, Essentiel, where you're having conversations, but I know you've also created an organization that sort of focuses on fencing and its ability to bring folks that look different together.
No, yeah, I did a camp for kids on my island for little girls. So the first thing was like to want to give back, but that's like years. I'm 2 years, 3 years ago, and yes, during the lockdown, I started Essential to give to create a platform for female athletes because. I believe that we still don't listen to female athletes enough, and like we still consider that they're not entertaining enough or not good enough, or they cannot like bring money enough. All these not enough things. And I just wanted to highlight their stories, because I believe we do like amazing things, and that people are interested in it, and like what you're doing tonight, it's great. I think we should do that more. And the idea was first like, representation. We don't see enough of female athletes. We don't see enough of like black female athletes. In Europe, we are behind America again about that. So maybe you have more platforms in the US, but in Europe, like, we still don't talk about these kind of issues, like black athletes, black female athletes, and female athletes in general. So there are a lot of things to talk about and to change. This is how I chose to do my part and to give my contribution to the fight. I do believe that it's going to be with everyone together. I mean, I don't do a platform just to talk to women athletes. I believe that men can also be interested in female stories, female athlete stories. I don't do a thing just to talk about to the Black community. I talked about difficult subjects with Gwen Berry when she knelt to last year in Lima. She talked about all this girl, like what it means for her to be a Black athlete in track and field, and like a female athlete. Like she talked about like being called a monkey on Fox, and these kind of things. And like it was really rough, but I want everyone to have access to these stories, to understand like, what is it? What does it mean to be a woman, someone from a minority anywhere in the world? It's not just in the US, it's everywhere, because like what you're doing, guys, is like, it's really important for everyone. I think like a lot of countries in Europe, I've seen like Germany talking about that, like the Netherlands, like historically colonialist country. And it's really important to understand, like, yeah, everyone has their own stories about racial injustices, and we need to talk about that. It's a lot of work to do, and I want to be part of it.
Yeah. Well said, Ysaora, for sure. It is a lot of work to do, but we applaud the efforts that you're making moving forward in the space as well. Sydney, I'll go to you. The league obviously is front facing, but for you personally, I know that you've been on various meetings. You are a member of the Social Justice Council. So what are the next steps as you see them in terms of moving these causes forward? You're muted, Sid.
It's funny, I was just on a call earlier, and Professor Crenshaw was on the call, and Laisha was on the call as well. And when Laisha and I got off, we were, talking back and forth because we were talking about our steps moving forward as a council, and what the council will look like moving forward. What will we be talking about? I'm sure these issues that Black people are facing won't go away. And so it'll be important for us to have a plan. And obviously the national anthem has been a very a widely talked about thing in a lot of leagues, and protesting it has been a big thing. We had players on the opening weekend where we had teams just, walk out during the anthem like we just weren't on the court. And for us, it'll be important to talk about that because the national anthem itself is rooted in racism. The man who wrote it had slaves, and so it's just, there are all of these institutions and things in place, and he says, talking about the Netherlands and Germany and pretty much every country in this world has some history of racism or some group that they mass murdered and they took over and claimed it as their own. So they're literally in everything that we do. And it's like Black people have so many ties to one another because we can look at the ways that racism has affected us and the things all over the nation, like different Black people still have the same story. So yeah, for us, I think we'll be looking to see, is the anthem, should that even be something that is played at a sporting event? Why are we even having to listen to that? And then individually, trying to make sure that I stay in touch with our advisor, specifically Professor Crenshaw, just because I've learned so much from her, and educating myself by reading, because a lot of white people, obviously, in this time, like Lynn and Isa both mentioned, white people are some are trying to educate themselves and trying to learn more, trying to have conversations that are difficult. And Black people, we don't all know all the answers either. We have, some I think some education that we can also that we also need to take place in our own lives. And so for me, just individually with my personal journey with activism, I know that that's something that I need to do so that I can approach topics with a background of a better understanding. Because if you don't understand, your history, then obviously it's bound to repeat itself. So yeah, I think education will be a big point for our council moving forward.
That is such a great point. And I actually had an opportunity to interview Diane Billings-Burford, who is the CEO of RISE, which is the Ross Initiative for Sports Equity. And they use sports the same way we're having this conversation. They use sports as a tool to help teach lessons about equality. And she made the great point. Sometimes you don't have the energy to read. She's like, there are some incredible TED Talks. There are some incredible conversations with professors who are up on this stuff and have studied it historically. She's like, feel free to turn those on as a means of educating yourself as well. Well, guys, we are winding this thing down into our last quadrant, shall I call it. And we got a really great question. I want to come back to you, Lynn, and then I'll go Lynn, Ysaora, and back to Sydney. Someone asked, how can corporations and brands better align with Black women athletes in this fight?
That is a good question. I think one, realizing that it's not a political movement, because I feel like a lot of brands are afraid to touch it because they're like, oh, this is political. We don't want to move that way, and realizing that this is just a human rights issue, and just giving Black women the opportunity to tell their stories and support them and putting them at the forefront. I think, we've said this multiple times, in putting Black women's voice at the forefront. But, I just think that, especially in women, and I just think it's by sport, I don't know what it is, but it's if you don't fit this sex appeal mold, then the brand isn't touching you. And I think brands need to stop doing that and start branding people off of their either athletic ability and what they're doing off the court, on the field, in fencing, whatever the sport is, or what they're saying, you know, and it shouldn't have to be about your physical attributes, and just giving the space to Black women that I think has been neglected for a very long time.
That's a tremendous answer. Ysaora, how can brands and corporations better support athletes, Black athletes, in this fight?
I really agree with Lynn. Also, I think a lot of brands, I think they need to understand that they've been using Black culture for a long time, but they don't know how and like what it means. You know, they've made money with Black culture. It's a really important point with my sponsor, Adidas. Like they try to figure out, it's a brand that is in Germany, so they're using Black culture, but in their strategy and like in the thing that they're doing, they don't understand, you know. And so they're using Black athletes, but they don't tell their story. As Lynn said, they don't understand what it means to be a Black athlete, and they don't have Black employees to also, I don't know, like educate or like translate to the campaigns and stuff, like what it really means. So I think in intern they have to do a work too. I mean, a lot of brands right now are trying to hire more like Black employees. It's important, I think, to tell also stories and to understand like the athletes too. I think that yes, it's not just about making money. It's really about telling stories. And right now, I think a lot of Black athletes want to use their voice. It's important. I mean, in the US, maybe it's everywhere, and so you think like it's a trend. But I think they need to spread it also in a global perspective. Like it's not just in the US; it's everywhere. And because I really think that with sports we can change things. So I think it's a lot of work in intern and also outside, like in the decision, like strategy and marketing decisions, and also just ask every woman. I think not like every story is different. This is what I've learned with Essential, is like every story is different, and every woman has a different story, has a different message, wants to talk about something. So it's also like communication and talk a lot with them, because I think the decisions are right now in a high level, and they just think like, okay, who can we use to tell this story? No, it's not about that. It's like, what is your story? What can I do to help you tell your story? You know, it's a different thing, I think.
Sydney, please jump in. What can brands and corporations do to help support Black women athletes in this work?
Yeah, I think a really good point was made that these companies appropriate all the time, and you make money off of Black people, but some of the times Black people aren't involved. So it's very strange. But until corporations and companies start to actually employ Black people and have Black women especially in positions of power, and have people in the rooms who are, because if we have a room full of white men and white women, and we don't have any Black people who are talking about how a story should be told or who should be used for this story, then the execution is always going to be a miss, because you didn't take the time to make sure that the people on your team look like the people you're trying to talk about, or the people that you're trying to reach. Yeah, Black people can tell when a Black person was not involved in something. We talk about it virally on social media, and it's very clear, like, oof, you did not think this through, or a Black person was not behind the scenes. So I think, you know, like, that's one of the biggest things. People, I think, act like tackling racism is so difficult, and like, what's the step I take? How do I do this? It's like, well, if you're in a position of power, when it comes down to two people and you have a Black person and a white person that are equal, like, who do you typically choose? Do you not even give a Black person a chance sometimes because their name is weird, or you feel like their name is too ghetto, or it was close, but I'm going to go with who I'm more comfortable with? No, like, you have to take chances on people, get your room to look different than just you. And then I think we can start to have some change and some, you know, actual diversity taking place, because it's, once again, it's very evident when there's no diversity behind the scenes, but you try to reach a group, versus when there is diversity behind the scenes. So, yeah.
These have all been tremendous answers, and we want to be mindful to honor you guys' time. So we're scheduled to wrap this thing up at 9:15, but I cannot let this conversation go on a heavy note, because this work can be heavy, it can be daunting, it can be draining. We have all felt so many of those emotions as I'm rattling my table. So let me get my hands off the table. But I have to know, before we get out of here, and we'll go Lynn, Ysaora, and Sydney again, and we got like 6 minutes, I'm getting a note. What gives you hope? And then really quickly, what do you love about being a Black woman?
Oh, that's a good question too. I've said that about every question. What gives me hope is like seeing a couple things. Seeing that this movement, if that's what you want to call it, hasn't died out. It's not something that was just like, ooh, fun, and then now it's done. I think that having conversations with my white teammates or non-Black teammates gives me hopes to know that they're actually there and wanting change as well. I said this isn't political, but this election gave me hope, and the results of this election have given me hope. And what makes me proud of being a Black woman? A lot of things. I love my skin color. I love that it like glows in the sun. I love just having a different look. You know, I'm mixed, so I love the fact that I'm able to have so many different cultures blended into one human being, and just and that's why I think I get so excited about who's going to be in the White House now, is that we have somebody who is Indian, but also a Black woman who was married to a Jewish man. And I'm like, that literally is my family. So that gives me hope, and it makes me excited for the future.
You're supposed to unmute me. Okay, Ysaora, please, what gives you hope? What do you love about being a Black woman?
Hope, I would say, like it's what's happening right now, but not just in the US. I said that many times. It's like globally, all around the world. I think a lot of things are changing, moving, and that we want to help each other. This is the thing. It's just like, also, I think we are aware about other people's problem. Like it's like in the Black community, but other minorities. I think it gives me hope. Even as a personal level, I'm more interested about other countries, about like other issues, like what can I do to help? It gives me hope. The election too. I'm not American, but I was really proud of you guys. It's awesome. Kamala Harris, I love her. So it's great. And what do I like about being a Black woman? I love so many things. I love to know how to dance, but my music, everything, where I come from, I'm Caribbean. I love the Caribbeans. I love like everything it represents. But I think it's also, we grew up thinking about who we are and what it means to be in this place everywhere around other people that accept or not our skin color. I think we reflect a lot about who we are, and it gives us like a dimension of like humanity, humans love, like what we should be doing to accept the other and to be accepted. I think that not everyone has that, actually, like to grow up and really questioning that, who you are and what you want to be in this world.
That's such a, you guys have all been fantastic. That's a great answer, Ysaora. Okay, Sydney, you got to bring it home. What gives you hope, and what do you love about being a Black woman?
What gives me hope? I think just a lot of Black people of all, different ages finding their voices in these moments. Like, obviously the voices have been birthed from, tragic situations that we've seen and murders that have taken place. But Black people are speaking more freely now, I think, than in any other time, and with a confidence and with a conviction about who we are and what we stand for and what we're not going to accept. So that gives me hope, and seeing the Black community come together, because I think obviously racism and Jim Crow, segregation, these things, and slavery, like they made sure that they tried to divide and conquer. And I think with mass incarceration, putting our fathers in jail and imprisoning us for drug offenses, drugs that they put in our neighborhoods. Like, it was just very tactical and strategic what they've done to our families. And so I find hope in seeing Black people coming together in these moments. And I hope that, you know, when we realize that our strength together is more powerful than what they could try to do to us, I think that's when we'll continue to make strides. And then what I love about being a Black woman is just like the connection that Black women can have. You know, somebody can say something crazy in a room and maybe somebody else doesn't really notice, and all you gotta do is really like, y'all both make the same face, you react the same way, and it's just a community and so many things that we do. The memes, Black Twitter, like we're hilarious. We influence the culture. We are the culture. So yeah, just being a Black woman is bomb.
I love all of those answers. We all mentioned Kamala Harris, and I think the thing that she said that rings in my ear when they did their speeches from Delaware is that she's the first, but she will not be the last in that position. And so when I look at you guys, Ysaora, all of your accomplishments in fencing, Lynn, you being such a powerful voice in a sport in which Black women are the minority, Sydney, all that the WNBA is doing, I hope that our audience was as encouraged as I am, because in many ways you guys still represent that first frontier, but you certainly will not be the last. And the work that you all are doing to pave the way for those behind you and those alongside of you cannot be praised enough. So thank you so much on behalf of the Black Women in Sports Foundation and Just Women's Sports for being so honest and candid. And of course, again, for the work that you are doing. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Folks watching, go check out all of their social platforms and all the super dope work that they're doing. Thank you for spending time with us tonight. Everybody stay well, wear your mask, maintain your distance, and wash your hands.
Bye.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.